Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Like I said, we have a very interesting guest joining us today, and I'm very happy she's here joining us. Elena Mannes is an award-winning independent documentary filmmaker, writer, producer with honors that include 6 Emmy Awards, George Foster Peabody Award, 2 Directors Guild of America Awards, and 9 Cine Golden Eagles. She has written, directed, and produced series and documentaries for CBS, PBS, and ABC, but she considers her greatest honor to be the journey she took with the remarkable being, her soul dog, Brio. When he came into her life, it changed completely. She was a driven, ambitious Type A network TV producer, trained to be skeptical, and with... I'm sorry, I lost my voice there for a second. Anyway, her experience with Brio led her into the world of animal communication, telepathy, and mediums. Her search for a lasting and meaningful connection with a dog led her to cross the boundaries of reason and material reality, and to believe that it's possible to communicate with a fellow creature even after physical death. Mannes invites readers to see the animals as thinking, feeling, spiritual beings whose connections extend far beyond those of death. And what a perfect topic for our show. Welcome to the show today, Elena. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm so happy to be with you.
And we are very happy to have you here, too. What a fantastic story. I mean, just from the introduction alone, it sounds very much like many of us who, how shall we say, been drawn to the spiritual realm and the spiritual awakening, where that type A personality was suddenly something profound happens and shifts our consciousness into a totally different way of looking at the world. And with that, I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about how that happened and what was it that inspired you to take on such a project.
Absolutely. Well, it was and has been indeed a fantastic journey, and I have to say nobody's more surprised about it really than I am. I would have been the last person to have expected that I would delve into the world of the paranormal and take this whole journey and write a book of this nature. My new book, Soul Dog, about my dog Brio and where the quest to understand him took me. I never would have thought that I would have taken this journey. But the way it happened was that I was sort of at the height of my professional career and doing very well. Really, and I, first of all, had a near fatal car crash on a film shoot, which was kind of a wake-up call, as one can understand, and also a relationship that I'd had for some time didn't end very well, and I thought, there has to be more to life than just work and the ambition to succeed and all that, and I had always loved animals. We'd had family pets, cats actually, but I had never sort of thought of them as more than quote unquote pets, that they're kind of under our control and they're there for comfort and companionship, and that's why I decided to get a dog. I'd always wanted a dog, so I got a standard poodle puppy and brought him home to my little apartment in New York City. And I thought, this is not really going to change my life at all. I'll have him trained and everything will be fine and things will be under control. Well, that things didn't really go that way in the beginning. He was a very independent-minded little dog clearly he had a mind, and even that early you could feel that he had something inside him, a spirit of his own, and he didn't always obey me. In fact, he frequently didn't obey me. There was one incident where he wasn't coming back as usual in the city park where I lived. I had him off the leash, and I was yelling and screaming for him to come to me and walking backwards. And all of a sudden I realized there was nothing beneath my feet, and I had jumped backward or fallen backwards into a boat pond, which fortunately wasn't too deep.
Oh my!
But it was quite humiliating. And a friend who was at the other end finally realized it was me, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I thought it was a homeless person taking a bath."
Oh no!
So things just weren't going as I had expected with Brio, and I was becoming kind of desperate to understand him better, and I had wanted this, close bond with my dog that one always hears about. And I wanted to know what he was thinking about and how I could somehow penetrate and, alter this situation. So I'd heard about people who call themselves animal communicators, psychics who say that they are able to read or feel what other animals, I should say, are thinking and feeling. So, I'm a journalist and I was curious, so I did a little research and I found this woman in California who had a good reputation, an animal psychic. So I called her up and I said, I have this puppy young dog and, could you read him? I didn't tell her anything about Brio except for his name and the breed. And she gave a remarkably accurate reading, having never met me or him, of course, describing my apartment and how it seemed from his point of view, navigating around the furniture. And she described the neighborhood where I lived and what streets Brio liked, all of which rang absolutely true. Wow. And so that really whetted my curiosity. I really was a skeptic. I didn't believe at all in anything, kind of woo-woo or the paranormal. But, I thought, how could she possibly have known all this, this detail?
Right.
So then, I started talking from time to time with other animal communicators and got other remarkable reports from Brio. And so one thing led to another, but we filmed the dog on site at Diane's house, and the psychic then later described exactly what the yard looked like, where the dog had been, in incredible detail again. So there was just I was amassing, all these sort of validating experiences that really was increasingly convincing me that there was something real to the idea of being able to communicate with another species telepathically.
Wow. So is it fair to say that prior to contacting this woman in California that you had never really interacted with psychics or anything of that nature?
Never at all. I mean, I never would have thought about it. Well, I mean, I had a very brief by accident reading myself from somebody at a friend's house that wasn't even planned, that in retrospect was kind of surprising, but I hadn't sought it out or, wanted to do it or anything. So it was not something that was in my realm of,
right.
Of thought,
Very interesting. And so what was it, I guess? What was it about? Was it like desperation of trying to understand the dog that inspired you to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, I just really, I had trainers and everything, and they did a good job, but I just still felt that I wasn't really communicating with Brio. I didn't really understand him, and I wanted to have this connection with him, but it didn't seem to be happening, He wasn't listening to me. I didn't really understand what was going on in his head. I thought he didn't like me. I thought he didn't love me. I was, really trying to find some way to get a better connection with him.
So, what were some of the things beyond what the psychic was explaining and sharing with you about Brio and his things, his way of looking at the world and your life and where he lived, etc.? What was it that kind of helped you understand him more? Were there any specific things that really resonated with you and hit home within your relationship?
Well, I mean, the details that they gave certainly convinced me that they actually were connecting with them. So that made me really realize that he wasn't a pet, he wasn't an inferior being. He was an equal, in a sense, with his own mind and spirit. And I came to view him more that way. And that really, really helped with a connection. I did come to have a very deep and a very profound connection with them, which also had to do, once I sort of opened up to really listening to him, which the psychics helped with, I really felt that he had this remarkable spirit and wisdom, and other people recognized it too. I once took him, for reasons that aren't important, to an appointment I had with a nutritionist, an Ayurvedic doctor. And this man took one look at Brio and said, "Oh, he's an old soul." And then he paid very little attention to me and just focused on Brio for the rest of the appointment. But friends noticed there was something special about him. One friend said you can look into his eyes and see the pyramids.
Wow.
He had and I don't know another word that really gets to his quality. It's a presence. I mean, he just was fully. You could tell he knew exactly who he was, and he was fully present in every moment of life. He helped me to find that at least part of the time.
Right.
So just observing him and being with him over the years really led me, first of all, to really bond with him. In the end, I certainly did, but to really have an internal spiritual experience, if you want to call it that, myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like there was you expanded your consciousness, that was for sure, to be able to explore this realm of possibilities and communication with the animals. My goodness. With that being said, what about I'm guessing you have spoken to more than one animal communicator, and for someone who's actually thought of it, I've actually thought of it with my own cats. I was having an issue a couple weeks ago, but they're doing better now, and was going to reach out to one. What were the experiences like? Can you tell us a little bit about what is the experience like for someone who reaches out to an animal communicator, especially as a skeptic?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, I did my due diligence to try to research people who had a good reputation or go by word of mouth. And the people that I came to really trust, once they'd given such accurate readings, I would go back to over and over again. But in the beginning, it's a completely shocking experience. It's an amazing experience to have somebody you don't know who's, across the country on a phone line tell you details about your animal that there's no way they could know. I mean, it just seems like, I don't know, a miracle or, impossible. I mean, I came to really know that it wasn't impossible, but it's, in the beginning, it's a life-changing experience. At least it was for me. I mean, it changes one's perspective on the nature of reality and existence itself. And that's, kind of what led me to really investigate what could be going on and some of the scientific work going on in this area, because these are big questions. And my dog had opened me up to really asking these questions about consciousness. Do animals have consciousness? Does consciousness endure after physical death? Those are the biggest questions of all that we all deal with.
And it's so cool that not only that you are exploring this or have explored these concepts, but it was done through animals. It's such a beautiful way to follow the path of consciousness and see where it leads. I mean, what a great introduction to that world. With that being said, you said that perhaps they were communicating back with us. Do you believe animals have telepathic connections with us? And do they send us messages? Did the psychic say, "Oh, well, Brio wants you to know this"? I mean, what is that? What's that like?
Absolutely. I mean, I have no doubt that they are, communicating with us and wanting to communicate with us. Not just Brio, but, I guess all, our fellow creatures, whether they're dogs, cats, other species. The science, like the famous Cambridge University scientist Rupert Sheldrake, who studied extrasensory abilities in non-human animals, strongly believes that they have stronger telepathic abilities than we humans do. I mean, we have it too, but all the noise in our lives probably kind of blocks it out. But, I have no doubt now that, yes, they have telepathic abilities and that they want to communicate with us. In fact, I'll tell you, I just did an event in New York last week about the book, and one person brought a dog, and 3 psychics in the room all felt that this dog was saying that she was very nervous with the person she was with, and was trying so hard to please, but she, just didn't seem to be able to do the right thing, which is, it was a sad message, but the fact that all 3 of the psychic intuitives in the room got that message from the dog leads me to really, the dog was trying to communicate.
Wow. And unfortunately, they were communicating that they were uncomfortable or unable to please.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yeah.
So to take that further, did they go on to offer solutions like what the dog needed or?
Well, to a degree. Obviously there's only so much one would want to say in a public situation, but
right. Very interesting. And as far as the idea that, well, immediately my personal experience jumps into my mind right now, where I've had a cat pass. And I either will see them out of the corner of my eye, or I'll feel them, walking on my bed or something like that. As far as like when they pass, do they still communicate with us according to the research that you've been doing?
Absolutely. Not only the research, well, my personal experience absolutely convinces me that they continue to communicate, which is, that's another big leap in consciousness and awareness, at least it was for me. And there's no science, hard empirical science, that proves that they are communicating telepathically after death. There's anecdotal evidence that Rupert Sheldrake, for one, has gathered. Right. There's anecdotal evidence of people who experience, very credible people who experience hearing or feeling the presence of their loved animals after they've passed. For example, in the book, I write about the border collie handler and author Donald McCaig, who actually I never would have thought that he would be, cited instances like this, but he has no question that his dogs come back after they've passed physically, because his other dogs react to their presence by barking, and he's seen this phenomenon more than once. And other people I've met, very not, eccentric, bizarre people,
right,
but
right.
Professionals have had similar experiences, hearing their dog bark in the night, for example, or feeling their paws going across a piece of furniture. I spoke with several people who have experienced this, and apparently it's a known phenomenon with humans too. It's called ADC, after-death communication. So, there is a big body of anecdotal evidence that this is a real phenomenon.
And you keep saying that scientifically it hasn't been proven, and I think that's the skeptics' first thing. Okay, well, it's never been empirically proven and whatnot. So when it comes to, well, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I always say that all of this like paranormal, metaphysical stuff is basically science that hasn't yet been discovered, because more and more we keep learning more about consciousness, and we are learning more and more about, let's say, the quantum world and communication, et cetera, et cetera. How was that adjustment, though, like that first experience of knowing that you were being that you were communicating with your dog? Was that a bit of a big pill to swallow?
Yes and no. I mean, you know, my skeptical, rational self, yes, it was a pill to swallow. But by then, by the time Brio passed, I didn't really have any question that he was communicating telepathically.
Right.
Possible.
Elena, we need to take a short break, but please hold that thought, because I want to talk about how we can help other people to maybe be aware of the communication that might be coming through. We'll be right back after this message. Let's get back to our topic today. We are talking about the spiritual life of animals. And before the break, I was asking Elena about what it was like to, well, swallow that pill, that things are not exactly as we thought it was. And Elena, I was wondering, for yourself, what was that one moment, perhaps, or that one, could you tell us the story behind you finally accepting that you were communicating with Brio?
You know, well, I mean, I had accepted it really when I was alive and in physical life.
Yeah.
But I think the greatest realization and gift really came after he had passed. Certainly in the days immediately following his passing, there were such amazing readings communicating from him, you know, via the animal communicators, that, you know, it was just undeniable that he really was there in spirit. I mean, for example, I had gone to a place in the country to scatter some of his ashes, and one of the communicators reported from him details of where precisely I was at the ocean, and I was sitting not on the beach, but back from the beach on a raised place. And then there was another report, I believe, from a different communicator a few days later, that I had gone to lunch in a restaurant and that there was a smoky fire. Now, I mean, the Brio was aware of this. I mean, that was so not in my mind when I was talking to the communicator that, you know, I mean, sometimes I asked, to play the devil's advocate, could they be reading my mind? But, right. You know, it wasn't in my mind. I mean, anyway, I mean, she reported, you know, details like that, that there's no way that anybody could have known. And there were, you know, months, years after, there continued to be reports that Brio was with me, for example, in my house. I mean, with specific descriptions of the room from his point of view. For example, base trim molding in the room of where he was sitting. You know, I mean, and the communicator, I mean, they'd never been in my house. They'd never seen it, you know, and certainly I was not thinking of the wood trim, you know, in my office, you know. I mean, just remarkable instances like that. I mean, not to mention, you know, Brio talking about my life and, you know, issues of what was going on and, you know, the lessons that I needed to learn. I mean, that was a huge part of the connection, you know, that I always felt once I did connect with him, it was clear to me he knew who I was. I mean, there was sort of it was such a deep connection that it's hard to describe.
That's wonderful and beautiful. You mentioned a term, ANSPI, am I saying that correctly? What is ANSPI?
Yeah, it stands for animal psi, you know, the psychic ability in animals, and it was coined by a rather famous naturalist of the early 20th century, William J. Long, who was the first to write about it. And, you know, he did write about it and believed that animal telepathy, psychic ability was a real phenomenon. And there was a lot of research in this area in the 20th century, and long said that it's a natural gift of the faculty of the animal mind, which is largely unconscious, and it is from the animal mind that we humans inherit it, which is pretty interesting.
That is. And with that being said, what about the religious beliefs? We always hear, animals don't go to heaven, or we hear that all dogs go to heaven, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the religious beliefs, and did that influence any of your search?
It didn't influence me. I mean, it was interesting research, but I don't come out of a particularly religious background in the sense of organized religion. But, excuse me, Christianity has somewhat conflicted views. There's a lot in the Bible about dominion over animals, but on the other hand, there are people like St. Francis of Assisi who really understood the nature of animals and believed that they were not inferior beings. Judaism also is somewhat mixed. The Hindu religion, believes in the afterlife, and so does Buddhism. I mean, it gets a little complicated with the Buddhist concept of the soul, so I won't go into all that, not being a total expert on Buddhism, but they do believe that animals, as well as humans, can reincarnate and come back. And there's a wonderful Buddhist concept about Maitreya. In short, it's a belief that the Bodhisattva, which is kind of a precursor of the next Buddha, comes back to Earth in the form of a dog to convey compassion and harmony. I mean, I just love that. The dog comes back to convey compassion. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are definitely many ways of looking at it depending on the religious background. For me personally, I have this belief that I do believe in reincarnation, and I do believe that the living beings that come into our life, whether they be animals or friends or parents or whatnot, have either been a part of our journey or they're here to teach us something. So it's that whole, like, we are one type mentality, and we're here to serve and to help heal and evolve each other, hopefully.
Right. And feel that connection with all living beings. And I do believe that Brio and other beloved animals come to us for a reason. I really have that conviction now that I learned so much from him. They are our teachers. They're not inferior beings. They're our teachers. And if we open up to that, there's such great gifts to be had.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing with the work that you've done and your experience with Brio and your research into the emotions, intelligence, and spirit of animals has taught you quite a bit. What were some of the things that you learned from all of this?
Well, in terms of the intelligence and emotions of animals, there is, considerable Western empirical science about this now in recent years, and we're learning that our fellow creatures are, more like us than we may have imagined. Their emotional reactions are very similar to ours. The same brain areas often are activated. There's neuroscience now, doing brain scans of dogs, for example. There's one neuroscientist, Gregory Burns at Emory University, who has scanned the brains of dogs. I mean, in one study, he has written that he wanted to know, his own dog had recently passed, and he wondered if his dog had really loved him, or was it more about the food that he got from his human being. And so he did a study comparing the reactions of dogs to food rewards compared to human, connection and emotional rewards from their person, and found that in many cases the human connection created a stronger reaction. It was, and in general, it was at least as strong an activation in emotional areas as the food rewards. So all those, there's so many studies going on now about animal cognition and emotion that it's absolutely fascinating. And, I spoke with scientists, for example, one well-known dolphin researcher who didn't want her name used because these people have to protect their scientific credentials. Yeah. But, she said she has no doubt that dolphins, with whom she works, have telepathic abilities, but she can't go public about that at this point.
And, there's so much speculation with dolphins, absolutely, and there's a part of me that feels they're probably more evolved than we are.
Right. It could well be.
Gosh, I think of that, what was that Hitchhiker's Guide where they, at the end, where they're like, thanks for the fish, goodbye.
Right. Well, elephants, you can go on and on.
Yeah. Yes,
chimps.
Elephants as well. Yes, all of them, not just pets. And I'm guessing with the work that you did do a little investigation into that beyond dogs and cats and pets, being that you spoke about dolphins. Were there any other animals that caught your attention?
Well, yeah, certainly elephants. There's a lot of research on their, intelligence and emotional capacity. There's such moving stories about elephants' emotional capacity and for empathy and compassion. For example, there was a well-known rescuer of elephants in Africa. I forget his name at the moment, but he himself passed away. A group of the elephants that he had rescued and turned out, and I believe it was in a large animal or elephant sanctuary far, far away, but they made, as a group, a whole trek back to where this man had died, where he was, and stayed for several days after he had died, and obviously, to pay homage to him.
Yeah, and we keep seeing, like on social media, we keep seeing these images of animals, for lack of a better term, performing almost like funeral rites for other members of their clan or pride
exactly.
or whatnot.
And elephants are noted for that.
Yeah.
And actually, I recently saw something about humpback whales also. Like a mother who, wouldn't leave the body of her calf who had died. So there's just more and more evidence of, the capacities of these creatures.
Absolutely. Now, Elena, you had mentioned before about studying some of the work of Rupert Sheldrake, and you actually interviewed him for your book. Is that correct?
I did. I interviewed him previously for a film, but I did talk to him again regarding the book and the questions that I had, and he was most helpful. And for listeners who might not know who he is, he's a Cambridge University trained biologist in England, and he is doing extensive research about extrasensory abilities of non-human animals. One of his famous studies was about dogs who seem to know when their owners are coming home, and he really researched this and did a case study, notably with a terrier mix who would go to the window when his person was leaving work or another place, and even at random times. It wasn't like, there was a set time every day, but he, would just somehow know, and he'd go wait at the window. And so Sheldrake really recorded these an anecdotal story like that, and acquired and amassed really data, showing that this was predictable, it was reliable, that he actually would do this.
Wow. And so his he has a theory of morphogenetic fields, and I'm guessing you looked into his research, and it kind of helped you understand a little bit about interspecies communication. How did that help?
And then, well, Sheldrake has a theory called, it's about morphogenetic fields, which is a long word, but Sheldrake, the term comes out of evolutionary biology, but Sheldrake, in short, believes that bonded beings, whether they be members of one species like homing pigeons or a dog and his owner, his person, communicate via these fields, invisible fields, which cross the boundaries of time and space, so that a dog could be communicating with his person over some distance and know when he or she was leaving to head home, or homing pigeons can find their home. So this theory of morphogenetic fields is really fascinating because it really speaks to this ability, which seems to be happening in telepathy between animals and people, or between people themselves, that there is some invisible wire, some connection between, especially people who are already connected with a deep love, or because they are members of the same group or species, for example, that these invisible fields continue to connect them and keep them connected, and can even perhaps, Sheldrake wouldn't claim that he's proven that they exist after physical death, but he believes that's entirely possible.
Oh yeah, as with humans as well. It almost goes back to that, what we were speaking of earlier, that we are one, the web of life, and we can communicate. Actually, it's very interesting the way that he explained it and the way that you're explaining it, as the Dogon tribe in Africa talks about the same thing, but with planets, and how planets have these fields that communicate with each other. And I mean, this is more on the micro level, and that's on the macro level, but it goes on to perpetuate that idea that life reverberates throughout the universe and communicates with itself, so to speak.
And there's fascinating new science about the trees communicate through their root systems.
Oh, yes. Yes, that as well. Absolutely. So with all of the research that you've been doing and all that you've learned, how do you see beliefs about the treatment of animals changing in the future? Is it already starting to change?
Well, for me, it's totally changed. I mean, I do believe that it's starting to change in a wider sense. Recognition that animals are conscious, aware beings. In fact, an international group of scientists met in 2012 and declared that neurological evidence really shows that our fellow creatures have the brain structures, so to speak, that show that they have consciousness and awareness. And I think that there is even without the scientific evidence, there's just a growing awareness that, animals are inferiors to be under our dominion, that we're, not superior beings, that they are equals, and perhaps even are superiors, as you mentioned, in some cases, with their own unique abilities. And as I've said, they are very much our teachers when we're open to that. So I think there is a movement underway that, there's an increasing recognition of trying to give animals legal rights and try to curb abuse of animals. And, hopefully this will go further. But that's one mission I had in writing this book, to, just do a little bit to help that message get out there.
Yeah, it's funny how I guess it's fair to say in the Western world, we seem to, rate or compare intellect and sentience by the size of the brain. We say, the cat's brain is only the size of a walnut, or, the elephant's brain is small, but there's a difference between brain power and consciousness, I would think. And I'm wondering if you saw any differences in your research.
Well, I can't claim to be an expert about, I'm not sure about the scientific studies regarding brain power and smaller brains, but in general, I do recall, I know that I've read that there's evidence that, as you say, brain, the size of the brain doesn't necessarily mean lesser brain power or intelligence.
No, considering how much of our brain we supposedly don't use, as they say,
right.
you know, which I believe is also a myth, but yes.
Right. I mean, birds, for example, I mean, many birds have incredible intelligence. They use tools, you know. I mean, it's pretty amazing what some birds can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, as far as the book is concerned, Soul Dog, A Journey into the Spiritual Life of Animals, what is the one, or is there a main theory or a main message that you're trying to get across to the readers, and what is that?
Well, I think twofold, really. One is to really look at animals differently than you may have. Two, as I've been saying, you know, really be aware that they are intelligent, feeling, sentient beings, and to treat them in accordance with that knowledge. And secondly, the great message that I personally learned from Brio and you know, I hope can be helpful to other people, that consciousness, the spirit endures. I absolutely believe that now, that it endures physical death. And what a huge lesson that is. I mean, I'm constantly grateful for that in my own life. And I learned that through my beloved dog. And I hope that in one way or another, that brings comfort to people who may have lost a beloved animal, to really open up to the fact that, you know, the animal is still there in spirit, that it's not all about physical form, and that the spirit, the presence of your companion is still with you. I mean, I know absolutely that Brio is still with me.
Actually, that was going to be my next question was, are you still feeling communication? Do you still feel his presence? Does the communicator, do you still work with the communicator to communicate with Brio?
I do sometimes work with a communicator, but more and more I find, you know, he may come to me in meditation, and I don't think it's something you can demand, but if you're open to it, it comes. And you know, he does come to me, and, you know, it's just hard to describe, but I absolutely feel his presence and a shift in my consciousness when that happens.
Yeah. Are you planning on doing anything more with this work? Do you plan on doing more research, or what's the future of this work for you?
Well, I'd very much like to take it further and do more research and speak to more people about their experiences. I would absolutely love to do that. Perhaps more books or a film. That's all in my mind. I mean, this book just got launched last week, so.
So we're just at the beginning. This could turn out to be a wonderful con festival documentary in a couple of years, right?
Well, let's hope. I mean, as I say, I really, you know, I want to get its message out.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And speaking of getting the message out, Elena, where can we get the book?
You know, you can get it on the major booksellers, Amazon, etc. You can go to the website for the book, which is www.souldogbook.com, and you'll see links to order it on there. Okay. So, you know, and I hope everybody enjoys it and spreads the word.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it truly is a fascinating topic, and one that I believe we need to talk more about. We talk about it with humans. What about our animals? Because they are a part of our family in many cases, and very much a part of life itself on our planet. So I thank you for bringing this to the forefront and bringing attention to it. And I thank you so much for joining us today, Elena.
Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, us too. Us too. Thank you. And for those of you that are watching live, I just wanted to remind you that I'll be releasing the archive of this, a cleaned up, edited version, probably later on this week or early next week. And remember that next week I will be doing a consciousness talk live. So if you have any questions for me, write them down, and we are going to get to them live on the air next week here on the Just Bernard Show. Have a great week, everyone. I love you very much. Bye-bye.